Hello, 9th and 10th. Welcome back to the Story of World Literature. We're continuing on our journey through Proverbs. We finished up biblical Proverbs last time, and this time we're going to be talking about other Proverbs seen throughout the world. And we're going to talk specifically about Confucius. A little biography of Confucius. We have his early life, also known as Quan Ki or King Futsu. Was born probably in 551 BC. That's in the lunar calendar, which is how they figure the calendar in Asia, specifically China, in present-day Khufu, Shandong province in China. Little is known of his childhood. Records of the historian written by Susoma Chain. I'm sorry, I know I'm butchering that. I don't speak an Asian language or even have an Asian accent there. That offers the most detailed account of Confucius's life. However, some contemporary historians are skeptical as to the record's accuracy. They always are. That's part of being an historian, is being skeptical and always trying to find more proof of something that has happened. Many of them even regard it as myth. According to the records of the historian, Confucius was born into a royal family of the Zhou dynasty. Other accounts describe him as being born into poverty. What is indisputed about Confucius's life is that he did exist during a time of an ideological crisis of China. So you can understand why in the records of the historian, where he is being touted as being born into the royal family and yet later takes on a job as a person who works in the palace, you can understand why they might look at that and say, well, maybe he wasn't really born into a royal family. Royals didn't usually get jobs in administration. The same thing is true for someone born into poverty. They generally don't get a job in palace administration either. So he was, we really don't know a whole lot about him, but it's pretty likely that he would be more middle class than anything else. Somebody who had great respect for the government at the time, but also had some privileges in his life. So let's talk about his philosophies and teachings. During the 6th century BC, competing Chinese states undermined the authority of the Zhou Empire, which had held supreme rule for over 500 years. Remember, what dynasty is just when several people from the same family all rule. Okay, so you have a grandfather, then a father, then a grandson, then a great-grandson. All of those leaders are part of the same dynasty. And over time, a dynasty does weaken and it has to be replaced because it just can't be kept on. Traditional Chinese principles began to deteriorate, resulting in a period of moral decline. Confucius recognized an opportunity and an obligation to reinforce societal values of compassion and tradition. His social philosophy was based primarily on the principle of ren, or loving others, while exercising self-discipline. He believed that ren could be put into action using the golden rule: what you do not wish for yourself, do not do to others. That golden rule is reiterated in scripture as well. So he is on the right path here. He's looking at something that it does not conflict with scripture. And that's something really important to look at when we look at people from other cultures and what they are teaching. We can have the same good principles going from culture to culture. We just have to make sure that they're the same good principles. If something conflicts with biblical teaching, then we can just determine that it's wrong. Okay, Confucius's political beliefs were likewise based on the concept of self-discipline. He believed that a leader needed to exercise self-discipline. That's important. The leader needs to exercise self-discipline, because if he can't lead in that, then nobody else in his country will have self-discipline either. He needed to exercise self-discipline in order to remain humble and to treat his followers with compassion. In doing so, he could lead by positive example. According to Confucius, leaders could motivate their subjects to follow the law by teaching them virtue and the unifying force of ritual propriety. His philosophy of education focused on the 6 arts that included archery, calligraphy, computation, that's mathematics, music, chariot driving, and ritual. To Confucius, the main objective of being an educator was to teach people to live with integrity. That means in truth. So, through his teachings, he strove to resurrect the traditional values of benevolence, propriety, and ritual in Chinese society. So when we come to his major works, he's credited with writing and editing some of the most influential traditional Chinese classics. Those include a rearrangement of the Book of Odes, those are songs, as well as a revision of the historical Book of Documents. He also compiled a historical account of 12 Dukes of Lu, called the Spring and Autumn Annals. Lun Yu, which sets forth Confucius's philosophical and political beliefs, is thought to be compiled by his disciples, not him. It is one of the 4 books of Confucianism that Chinese philosopher Zhu Zi, a self-proclaimed Neo-Confucianism, published in Shishu in 1190. Far-reaching in its influence, Lun Yu was later translated into the English under the title The Analects of Confucius. Okay, so when we talk about Confucius, we have to look at his background. We don't really know much about his family, his young life, but we do know about how he was perceived by the people around him. And he was always seen as being a man who really wanted to live truthfully and kindly. For his death and legacy, let's continue on. Convinced that his teachings had not made a significant impact on Chinese culture, Confucius died on November 21st, 479 BC. Now, just last time we got together, we talked about, that was the wrong class, sorry. There is a famous poem called Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night. I just went over it with junior high. That's what I was flashing on. Sorry about that. Where one of the groups of people who will fight death, won't go gentle into the good night of death, is people who have great things to say, but they don't feel like they've ever made an impact on the world. And unfortunately, Confucius must have felt that way. He did not believe he made a significant impact on Chinese culture. Of course, now we know that he did. It even makes an inroad into Mulan, the movie, not the poem. Let's see, he died November 21st, 479 BC in Qufu, China, a year after losing his son Zulu in battle. His followers held a funeral and established a mourning period in his honor. As of the 4th century BC, Confucius was regarded as a sage, that's a wise man, who had deserved greater recognition in his time. By the 2nd century BC, during China's first Han Dynasty, his ideas became the foundation of the state ideology. Today, he is widely considered one of the most influential teachers in Chinese history. Okay, so the first proverb we're going to look at of his, for some reason it didn't stay bold. I apologize for that, but let's take a look at that. His first one is never impose on others which you would not choose for yourself. Now, we just talked about that in the introduction, but I ask you the question for number 1, how does this compare to the Matthew 7:12, which is typically known of as the golden rule? So I want you to look up Matthew 7:12 and compare this proverb with the biblical proverb and see if it fits. Is it okay? Does it conflict with scripture or does it agree with scripture? It's important to ask. Okay, the next proverb is real knowledge is to know the extent of one's ignorance. People who study a great deal, or they have a specific field of study that they really appreciate and enjoy, and that they purposely study for their own enjoyment and for their own ability to grow, will very openly state that the more that they study and the more that they learn, the less that they know. Okay, it is a very real truth. I've talked before about I love books, and the more books I read, the more I want to read. And the older I get, the more I realize that it's going to be very unlikely that I get to read every book that I've ever wanted to read, and to understand it and appreciate it the way I should. This year, I have done something a little different with my reading program. I do have my normal, so many books I want to read this year, but I'm also planning to read through my library. You can see it behind me, at least one shelf at a time. So I'm working on my first shelf right now. I still have a few to read on the first shelf, but also I'm going back through children's books I wish I had read when I was a child, because they have become so classic to the modern world. I'm reading the Oz books right now. I enjoyed them more when I first started reading them than I'm enjoying them now, because I feel like he's just repeating himself at this point. He had like 16 books in there, and I'm on night 9, I think. So I've got a few more to go, and I'm starting to get a little frustrated with them because they're very repetitive. But I am trying to learn something, and that's what I'm trying to get through to all my students. And I've tried to do this throughout the years in the classroom to encourage you to please start learning on your own. Yes, you need teachers. Yes, you do need classroom instruction. That's really important. I enjoyed my classroom instruction in college, especially. When I was in high school, I did a type of Christian schooling that was really just homeschooling in a classroom. It was the ACE program where we sat in little offices and did pace work on our own. So we taught ourselves within a classroom setting. I didn't have actual teachers in high school. I had monitors who went around the room and basically dismissed me to go check my work or, administer tests for me. So when I went to college, it was very different, and I was really ready to go to school again when I went back to college, and I enjoyed the classroom discussions and learning. But between high school and going back to college when I was, oh my goodness, in my 30s, I did a lot of studying on my own, which means I read quite a bit. And I always have tried to read things that are a little out of my comfort zone. So I read a variety of genres. I read a variety of grade levels. If something has been listed on multiple lists of, books you should read before you die, that seems to always be the title of the list. 100 books you should read during your lifetime, 50 books you should read before you die. I have tried to read based on a lot of those lists, and I've gotten pretty far. I really have. I've had to learn to teach myself. And right now, you are in a very specific point in history where you are expected to teach yourself. Now, you have me coming into your house through, the internet, teaching you, or at least talking to you about what you should be learning. I'm giving you some guidance here, but it's really up to you at this point. You're not going to have me standing over you every day in the classroom and saying, hey, don't forget to get that work done. Now, what did you really think of that? Stop talking in the back and listen. Okay, you don't need me to do that for you all the time. You really didn't need me to do it at school to get after you. You need to start to learn how to learn on your own. And part of that is discovering I'm giving you the jumping off part. I'm telling you, hey, here is Confucius. Here are his Proverbs. It is up to you to look them over and ask yourself, does this apply to me? Does this apply to right now? Is this biblically correct? Those are the questions you need to be asking yourself. And the more you question, the more you ask, the more you're going to be pushed to learn even more. And that's so important. You need to do that. So all that for number 2. Number 3 says, I hear and forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. Now, I'm very open about my methods of teaching in the classroom. And in fact, I even put it into your syllabus at the beginning of the year. I do slideshows. I do lectures. And I do notes. So you hear my lectures, but you're going to forget most of what I say because that's just the way our brain is built. You see the lecture slides, and that helps you to remember a little bit better. You'll start placing pictures with lecture notes. And then I do and I understand. That's the homework that you're given. Okay, number 4, everything has beauty, but not everyone sees it. We are getting better and better about that today with learning to see the beauty in things and in people. And that's so great. I love that. Number 5, the superior man is aware of righteousness. The inferior man is aware of advantage. The idea that someone who is superior in their life is looking for truth, righteousness, or rightness. The inferior man is only looking at who has what advantage. Number 6, wheresoever you go, go with all your heart. Whew, okay, that sounds really, really good until you think about it. What if you're going on the wrong path? Should you still go there with all your heart? What if you are on a downward spiral? Should you go there with all your heart? Number 7, our greatest glory is not in never failing, but in getting up every time we do. If you make a mistake, make it right, move on. Number 8, he who learns but does not think is lost. This is what I've been trying to get through to you guys. You can sit in the classroom year after year after year, and you can even do all the homework and get 100% on your homework. But if you don't try to think for yourself, all of that classroom sitting in is not going to do you a bit of good. You have to be able to apply what you've learned to your life. You have to think. Let's go to the next one. He who thinks but does not learn is in great danger. These are people who already think they know everything, and so they don't see the point in paying attention in class at all, or pay attention to people who have already been through the same kind of thing. Number 9, he that would perfect his work must first sharpen his tools. This is so simple, and honestly, if I actually decorated my classroom, I might put this over the pencil sharpener. It's a good one. If you're going to do well in school, you have to have your school supplies. If you're going to do well at any job, you have to have your proper tools. Number 10, if you look into your own heart and you find nothing wrong there, what is there to worry about? What is there to fear? I'm going to let you guys think that one through. Now, part of your homework is to take 3 of these proverbs and apply them to yourselves as a student. What 3 of these proverbs could you say, I can live according to that statement as a student? I want you to think about that on your own time once we're done with this lecture. Now we're going to go right into our next proverb writer from China, a man named Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu, or Lao Zai, who existed in 6th century BC, is the founder of the Chinese philosophical school of Tao, or Taoism. He was known to be a contemporary of the great and most revered Chinese teacher and philosopher Confucius, but some legends believe they were both the same person. Probably not, though. Whereas, according to some, he existed before Confucius. The origin and life of Lao Tzu is extremely ambiguous. That means we really don't know. And even after centuries of research, very little is known about his life. Nevertheless, his teachings have been handed down through the centuries, and today his followers are manifold. That means there are many of them. Lao Tzu's philosophy was known to have been prominent during the Han Dynasty, though the philosopher lived during the Zhou Dynasty, the longest surviving dynasty in primeval China. It was in the Han Dynasty that Taoism was strongly established and was religiously followed. However, none of the original texts about Taoism have any reference about Lao Tzu's life, which is really strange that his philosophies would remain, but nothing about his life would remain. Due to less information, several speculations, confusions, and also conflicts about the life and death of Lao Tzu have arisen in the past few decades. Many researchers are of the view that Lao Te Ching was the religious and philosophical book written by Lao Tzu was in fact not written by him alone. Some others are even of the opinion that the philosopher never existed, and Lao Tzu can be referred to any old wise man of the ancient China who preached philosophy. So there's that possibility that maybe it wasn't one person, it was multiple people. So let's look at his early life, which we really didn't know a whole lot about because we just got that from the introduction. Lao Tzu's personal life is still shrouded in mystery, and there are many legends associated with his birth and life. The only reliable biography of him is a Shiji, written by historian Sima Quan of 145 BC. According to the Shiji, his biography, Lao Tzu was born in the Ku country of the state of Chao, in the present-day Luyi county of the Henan province. His family name was Li, while Dan was his designation. Legend says that he was born after spending 8 or 80 years in his mother's womb. Okay, that's a long pregnancy. I don't see that happening. For which he was called the old child. In other words, he stayed in there so long he pretty much came out old. At that time, the Zhao dynasty flourished, and he worked as a shi, or historian, at the royal court. Somewhere around this time, he was known to have met the great Confucius and supposedly criticized his arrogance. Confucius, on the other hand, was so fascinated by the scholar, he drew a comparison between him and a dragon, which glides on the wind and through the clouds in the sky. Lao Tzu embarked on a voyage to the west in his later life, and after an early realization that the Zhao dynasty was on the verge of collapse, he traveled to Jiangsu Pass to enter the state of Qin, where he met the guardian of the pass, Xingxi, who insisted the philosopher write a book. Upon his request, he began writing the book, the Jiao Zheng, which is a combination of Dao, which means way, and Di, its virtue. The book is a philosophical account and can be literally translated as the classic of the way of power. Following the completion of the book, the wise old man left Jiangsu Pass, and nothing was known about his whereabouts thereafter. Lao Tzu is primarily known for his book Tao Te Ching, or Dao Jing, which contains philosophical and religious scripts about Taoism depicted through 81 short poems. Taoism or Taoism is a way of life, but which is all about harmonious living, was founded by him. It is divided into 2 categories, philosophical and religious Taoism. Philosophical Taoism, or the school of Tao, is based on the ancient Chinese texts of both Dao Jing by Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi, written by a philosopher of the same name. Religious Taoism, on the other hand, refers to a family of systemized religious movements sharing thoughts derived from the Daojia, or family of Tao. According to many popular legends, the philosopher got married and also had a son named Zong. Don't name your kid Zong. Who later became a legendary soldier. The teachings of Lao Tzu and Taoism influenced the Han Dynasty the most. It was there that Lao Tzu was held synonymous with God, a belief which gave rise to the Taoist movement called the Way of the Celestial Masters, or Tianshan Tao, in 42 CE, which is 80. The movement controlled the legislation of present-day Sichuan, which suggests that the ancient state of Sichuan was theocratic, or led by God. The Tao Te Ching, the philosopher, preached the essence of nature in human lives and that everyone should go back to nature. Naturalness is the mainstay of the book, which talks about the primitive state of all things that exist. Over time, Lao Tzu came to be seen as a personification of Tao, meaning the path or principle, in order to reinstate the way. This is a really interesting thought process about Tao being actually a personification, just as the noble woman is a personification of wisdom in Proverbs in the Bible. That maybe he wasn't a real person, maybe he was just a personification. He emphasizes simplicity of life, spontaneity, and detachment from desires. And that's a religious philosophy that is seen throughout Asian culture, that detachment from desires, because everything is really geared more towards the family unit rather than the individual unit. Taoism believes in the One, which is natural, spontaneous, eternal, nameless, and indescribable. It is at once the beginning of all things and the way in which all things pursue their course. The path or the way it talks about is often referred to as the flow of the universe. So let's take a look at his Proverbs. Number 1 says, "The great Tao flows everywhere, to the left and to the right. All things depend on it to exist, and it does not abandon them. To its accomplishments it lays no claims, but loves and nourishes all things, but does not lord it over them." Okay, so for your homework, you are to Google or look up the word Tao and write the definition. And then I want you to look at this proverb specifically and tell me how it conflicts with biblical truth. I'm telling you flat out, this is not a biblical truth. So I want to know how it conflicts. What is it about it that's not biblical? Okay, number 2, to attain knowledge, add things every day. To attain wisdom, remove things every day. I'm not going to explain that one to you. You guys figure out what it means. When I let go of who I am, I become what I might be. Great acts are made up of small deeds. Number 5, be content with what you have. Rejoice in the way things are. We can find some biblical truth in these, but ask yourself, what do these mean? When you let go of who you are, how can you become what you might be? What is it that you are giving up to become something else? The idea that great acts are made up of small deeds. I love that philosophy, that phrase, and that does have something to do with biblical truth. Jesus taught that as a parable with the parable of the mustard seed. It is the smallest of seeds, and yet it can grow into a tree that can house a bird. Or the idea that you can just take one little pebble away at a time and move a mountain. Be content with what you have. That's straight out of Paul's teaching. Rejoice in the way things are. Let's take a look at, number 5, we need to continue it. When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you. When you are content, you take on everything as you relate to it as if it belongs to you. Number 6, the mark of a moderate man is freedom from his own ideas. Tolerant like the sky, all-pervading like sunlight, firm like a mountain, supple like a tree in the wind. He has no destination in view and makes use of anything life happens to bring his way. Sounds nice, but it also means that you're going to be wandering around a bit. So let's take a look at this. A mark of a moderate man is freedom from his own ideas. And the idea there that he's going to take in other people's ideas and not his own. He will be tolerant like the sky, all-pervading like sunlight. He'll be everywhere. Firm like a mountain, supple like a tree in the wind. He's blown about, but he still remains rooted. But this part is where it falls apart for me. He has no destination in view. He has no end game. So when it says he makes use of anything life happens to bring his way, what's the purpose of having use for something if you have no end goal? So think about those and tell me what you think about them. Just jot it down in your homework. Number 7, a man with outward courage dares to die. A man with inward courage dares to live. Ooh. Knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom. Can you really know yourself? Is that biblical? Mastering others is strength. Mastering yourself is true power. That is straight out of Proverbs too. Number 9, from wonder into wonder, existence opens. And number 10, and you may have heard this one before, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So I want you to choose 3 of these proverbs, explain them in your own words, and tell me whether or not they conflict with biblical truth. Some may agree with biblical truth and others will conflict. That's the whole purpose of this exercise, is to find out what conflicts and what doesn't. If it doesn't conflict with biblical truth, feel free to apply it to your life. It's okay. It's not a technically religious work here. These are proverbs that have some religious power to them, but they're not totally religious. So ask yourself, what does work here and what does not? Because we can learn from all kinds of sources, and that's really kind of important. I believe that's everything today. Yep, that's it. That's everything. We're stopping about a minute early. Whoo, big party for you. Make sure you get this homework done. Now, as for the homework, I told you I'd have like a new grading program for you. It's going to be really complicated if I try to do that right now at this point. So I'm going to have you continue on with sending me your stuff for literature. You're just going to be sending it to me. Just type it into a blank email. And I can do that for you. I'm not going to have you do that with every class, but I am telling you that I want you to do that for literature. So for literature, just type it into a blank email and feel free to elaborate on your answers. That's really important. I want you to really think about and learn from these proverbs. So you can start sending me those new homeworks at any time. because I'm going to be keeping up with those little by little. Um, I it takes me a long time to grade because I'm doing everything individually. So I will get that back to you as soon as possible. So you get it to me, I'll get it to you. I'm really not putting any due dates on anything right now. I just need to make sure that everything is in before I have to do the final grading. So do it a little bit at a time so neither of us get really stressed out. Okay. And I will talk to you guys next time. Have a really good day.